So, what happens when the very rules that shape millions of lives, rules about work, about rights, about education, are suddenly torn up and rewritten? That's what we're going to unpack today. A massive policy shakeup happening in India. Okay? Let's get right into it.
And this all boils down to one huge question, really. Are these changes a much-needed upgrade to fix systems that were already broken, or are they a serious downgrade that could strip away protections people have relied on for years? We're going to look at both sides.
Now we're looking at two places that seem totally different on the surface: the fields and villages of rural India and the busy campuses of its universities. I mean, they feel like worlds apart, right? But both are right at the center of these huge controversies over new rules that could change everything.
All right, so to really understand what's going on, we've got to look at the before and the after. Let's start with that rural employment safety net.
So here's the absolute key difference. The old system, MGNREG, it was a legal right. That means any rural family could literally demand 100 days of work and the government had to provide it. The new proposed act, which we're calling VBG-RAMG, flips that completely. Now work will only be given out in specific areas that the central government decides to notify. So the power shifts, right? It goes from you, the citizen, demanding work, to the state deciding if and where to offer it. That's a huge change.
Now let's switch gears and head over to the universities, because a really similar debate is playing out there. The body that sets the rules, the UGC, has changed how it defines discrimination. Before, the protections were pretty broad, but these new rules narrow it way down. They say discrimination happens only on the basis of caste or tribe. And that one little word, only, is at the heart of the entire uproar.
Okay, so why make these changes in the first place? Well, if you ask the people behind these new rules, they'll tell you this isn't a downgrade at all. It's a much-needed fix for broken systems. Let's dig into their side of the story.
So for the Employment Act, the argument is that the old system, MGNREG, was, well, kind of a mess. Supporters will point to corruption, to technical problems. They also say that some wealthier states were actually getting more money than poorer states, and this new, centralized way of doing things will let them spread the resources around more fairly and efficiently.
And what about the university rules? What's the official reason there? Well, it's pretty direct. They say the goal of that new, stricter definition is to clamp down on what they call false complaints of discrimination, something they argue was a real problem with the older, broader rules.
But, and this is a big but, a lot of people are not buying these explanations. Not at all. In fact, we're seeing this huge backlash from economists, activists, and students who think these changes are a really dangerous step backward.
And the criticism, it's sharp. Jean Drèze, an economist who was actually involved in creating the original act, he doesn't hold back at all. He calls the new act a hoax, says it has no teeth, and is basically little more than hot air. Strong words.
So what's at the heart of all this criticism? It all comes down to this one idea, the demand-driven guarantee. Think of it this way. It's the difference between having a right to something versus having to wait for a handout. The old system was a right. You could demand it. Critics say the new act, well, it rips that right away, completely dismantling the foundation of the safety net.
And the pushback on the university rules? Oh, it's just as intense. Critics are coming from all angles. They're saying it goes against the principle of natural justice and that it totally fails to protect students from the sneakier kinds of discrimination, like in an admissions interview. They also argue that by focusing so narrowly, it actually leaves students in the general category, those not in a protected caste, with no clear protection from other kinds of prejudice.
And this is where you see the real-world impact, you know? It's not just about rules on a page. A student union wrote a letter and they warned that these new regulations could completely poison the campus environment, creating an atmosphere of fear and distrust. Imagine trying to learn and grow in a place like that.
So okay, we've heard the arguments and the policy jargon. But what does all of this actually mean for real people? Why should we care? Let's zoom in on the human side of all this.
You know, when we talk about this Employment Act, we're talking about the main and sometimes the only source of income for millions of India's most vulnerable families. For them, this is not some abstract political debate. This is their lifeline. It's their safety net, and it's being completely rewired.
And just think about this number for a second. 0.25%. That is the tiny slice of India's entire GDP that's currently spent on this program. Critics are already saying this is basically a huge budget cut. And their biggest fear, that without that legal guarantee of work, that already small number could shrink to almost nothing. And back on campus, the stakes are just as high.
This is all about making sure that universities are safe places where every single student, no matter their background, has a fair shot. It's a fight for what the learning environment for India's entire next generation is going to look like.
So, it all leaves us with this one big question, doesn't it? Whether we're